The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon, as Sarah Blake's screams echoed through the small wooden cabin on the outskirts of Thornfield, Arizona Territory, 1878. She clutched her swollen belly, her face contorted in agony as she realized what was happening. Her baby was coming, nearly 2 months before it should. "William! William!" she cried out, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the kitchen table as another contraction tore through her body. William Xavier had just returned from checking the cattle when he heard his wife's desperate calls. He burst through the door, his tall frame filling the doorway, the dust from the range still clinging to his worn leather chaps. The sight before him turned his blood-cold. Sarah hunched over in pain, a small puddle of fluid at her feet. "The baby," she gasped, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at him with terror in her eyes. "My baby was born too early," she cried. "It's coming now. We need the doctor." William's heart hammered in his chest as he helped Sarah to their bed. "I'll get Doc Miller. Hold on, Sarah. Just hold on." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, trying to hide his fear. They'd waited 3 years for this child, 3 years of hoping and praying after losing their first to fever. He couldn't bear to lose another, couldn't bear to see the light go out of Sarah's eyes again. "Don't let our baby die," Sarah whispered, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "I won't," William promised, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his throat. "I'll bring back the doctor. Just stay strong." Outside, the darkness was nearly complete as William saddled Thunder, his most reliable stallion. The nearest doctor was in Prescott, a good 25 miles away. It would take him hours to make the journey, even pushing Thunder to his limits. But there was no choice. The night air was cool against his face as he spurred Thunder forward, leaving behind the small homestead that he and Sarah had built with their own hands. Their nearest neighbors, the Johnson family, lived 3 miles away. William had considered asking Mrs. Johnson to stay with Sarah, but there wasn't time. Every minute counted. As Thunder's hooves pounded the hard, packed earth, William's mind raced with memories. He'd met Sarah 3 years ago when she arrived in the Arizona Territory with her father, a silver prospector with big dreams and empty pockets. She'd been like a breath of fresh air in the rough and tumble town, refined, educated, with a gentle manner that belied her inner strength. He'd fallen for her almost immediately, though it had taken months to convince her father that a rancher with modest means was worthy of his daughter's hand. The moon emerged from behind a bank of clouds, illuminating the rugged landscape. William kept Thunder at a steady gallop, knowing he needed to save the horse's strength for the return journey. The trail to Prescott was treacherous in daylight. At night, it was downright dangerous. But he pushed forward, the image of Sarah's pain-stricken face driving him on. 4 hours into his journey, Thunder began to falter. William dismounted, leading the exhausted animal to a small creek to drink. He splashed water on his own face, trying to clear his head. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. His wife and unborn child depended on him making this journey successfully. "Come on, boy," he murmured to Thunder, patting the horse's neck. "Just a little farther." The lights of Prescott appeared in the distance as the first hints of dawn crept across the eastern sky. William's body ached from the hard ride, but relief surged through him as he guided Thunder down the main street toward Dr. Miller's home and office. He pounded on the door, not caring about the early hour. After what seemed like an eternity, a light appeared in the window, and the door swung open to reveal a disheveled, gray-haired man in a nightshirt. "William Xavier." Dr. Miller squinted, recognition dawning on his face. "What in tarnation?" "It's Sarah," William interrupted, his voice hoarse from the dust of the trail. "The baby's coming early. Please, you've got to come. Dr. Miller's expression grew serious. How early? 2 months, maybe more. The doctor nodded grimly. Let me get my things. Is she bleeding? I don't think so, not when I left. Small mercies, the doctor muttered, disappearing into the house. William paced outside, every second feeling like an hour. Thunder stood with his head lowered, flanks heaving. The horse wouldn't make the return journey, not at the pace they needed. Dr. Miller emerged with his medical bag and a determined expression. My horse is fresh. Yours looks done in. He is, William admitted. I pushed him hard. Leave him here. You can take my mare. She's fast and rested. I'll follow with my wagon and supplies. You ride ahead and tell Sarah I'm coming. William nodded gratefully. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Miller said grimly. Early babies. Well, just get back to your wife. The doctor's mare was indeed fresh, and William pushed her to her limits. The return journey was a blur of dust and determination. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly as William raced against time. When he finally reached the cabin, he practically fell from the saddle, his legs numb from the long ride. He burst through the door, calling Sarah's name. The sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Sarah lay on their bed, her face pale and drawn, her nightgown soaked with sweat. Beside her sat Mary Johnson, their neighbor, cradling a tiny, impossibly small bundle. William, Sarah whispered, her voice weak but filled with wonder. You have a son. He approached cautiously, almost afraid to look at the child that had arrived so unexpectedly early. Mary stepped aside, allowing him to see the baby's face red and wrinkled, with a wisp of dark hair plastered to his forehead. He's so small, William murmured, reaching out a tentative finger to touch his son's cheek. But he's fighting, Mary said, her tone cautiously optimistic. He's been trying to nurse, though he's too weak to latch properly. William knelt beside the bed, taking Sarah's hand. Dr. Miller's on his way. I rode ahead on his mare. Relief washed over Sarah's face. Thank God. Mary cleared her throat. I should get some fresh water and clean linens. The doctor will need them. She carefully placed the baby in Sarah's arms before slipping outside to the well. Alone with his family for the first time, William felt tears burn his eyes. I was so afraid, he admitted. So was I, Sarah whispered, her gaze fixed on their son's tiny face. When the pain started, I thought we would lose him like we lost Emma. Their daughter had lived only 3 days before succumbing to fever. I prayed the whole time you were gone. I prayed for you to return safely with the doctor, and I prayed for our son to hold on. William leaned forward to press a kiss to her forehead. He's strong, like his mother. The baby made a small, mewling sound, his tiny fingers flexing against the blanket. He was fighting for every breath, his little chest rising and falling with visible effort. What shall we call him? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. William studied his son's face, seeing in it all their hopes and dreams for the future. Samuel, he said finally. It means heard by God. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Samuel William Xavier, she whispered. It's perfect. The sound of wagon wheels and hoofbeats announced Dr. Miller's arrival. William reluctantly left his wife and son to greet the doctor, who descended from his wagon with surprising agility for a man his age. She delivered already? The doctor asked, gathering his bags. William nodded. A boy. He's very small. Dr. Miller's expression was grim but determined as he followed William into the cabin. Mary had returned with fresh water and linens, and she stepped back respectfully as the doctor approached the bed. Mrs. Xavier, he greeted Sarah, his tone professional but kind. Let's have a look at this early arrival, shall we? The next hour was tense as Dr. Miller examined both Sarah and the baby. He listened to the infant's heart and lungs, checked his reflexes, and inspected his tiny form with methodical precision. Well, William finally asked, unable to bear the suspense any longer. Dr. Miller sighed, setting down his stethoscope. He's early. There's no doubt about that. Probably about 7 months along by my estimation. His lungs aren't fully developed, which is the main concern. The next few days will be critical. Sarah clutched the baby closer. But he has a chance. Yes, the doctor confirmed. He's breathing on his own, which is a good sign, but you'll need to keep him warm. Skin-to-skin contact is best. And you'll need to get some milk into him, even if he's too weak to nurse properly. You might need to express some milk and feed him with a dropper. He turned to William. I'll stay the night, monitor his progress. I've brought some medicines that might help if he develops breathing difficulties. William nodded gratefully. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. Dr. Miller's expression softened. I know you're worried about the cost, Xavier, but let's focus on getting your boy through the next few days first. As night fell once again, the little cabin became a battleground for Samuel's life. The baby's breathing grew labored around midnight, his tiny body struggling for each breath. Dr. Miller administered drops of a medicine that seemed to help, but his expression remained grave. Talk to him, the doctor advised Sarah as she held the baby against her bare chest, trying to transfer her warmth and strength to him. Let him hear your voice. It gives them something to fight for. So Sarah talked and sang, her voice sometimes breaking with emotion but never stopping. She told Samuel about the home his father had built, about the horses in the corral, and about the wildflowers that bloomed in the spring. She promised him adventures and bedtime stories, Christmas mornings and summer picnics. William sat beside them, adding his own deep voice to the conversation when Sarah grew too tired to continue. He told his son about the ranch they would build together, the cattle drives they would lead, and the fishing trips they would take. Dawn broke with Samuel still fighting, still breathing. Dr. Miller looked surprised but pleased when he examined the baby. His color's better, he noted, and his breathing seems less labored. Have you managed to get any milk into him? Sarah nodded tiredly. A few drops at a time. He seems to be swallowing. Good, good, keep doing that. Every drop helps him grow stronger. The doctor stayed for 3 days, teaching Sarah and William how to care for their premature son. He showed them how to clear mucus from his tiny airways, how to position him for easier breathing, how to feed him when he was too weak to suckle. On the 4th day, Dr. Miller prepared to leave. I need to return to Prescott, he explained. I have other patients who need me, but I believe your son has turned a corner. He's a fighter, that one. William walked the doctor to his wagon. How can I ever repay you, doctor? Miller waved a hand dismissively. Consider it my investment in the future of the territory. We need strong families like yours. He paused, then added, I'll come back to check on him in 2 weeks. In the meantime, send word if his condition changes. As the doctor's wagon disappeared down the dusty road, William returned to the cabin, where Sarah sat in a rocking chair by the window, Samuel cradled against her chest. The baby's eyes were open, dark blue and somehow alert despite his tiny size. He's looking at me, Sarah whispered, wonder in her voice. Really looking. William knelt beside them, his heart swelling with love and hope. He knows his mama. And his papa, Sarah said softly. He turned his head when he heard your voice. William gently stroked his son's cheek with one finger. The tiny face turned toward his touch, and for the first time since Samuel's birth, William allowed himself to believe that their son might survive. The next weeks were a constant struggle. Samuel would seem to improve, then suddenly develop a fever or breathing difficulties. William and Sarah took turns holding him, keeping him warm, feeding him tiny amounts of milk with a dropper fashioned from a clean quill. Their neighbors rallied around them. Mary Johnson came daily to help with household chores and cooking. Her husband, Tom, took over many of William's ranch duties, ensuring the cattle were tended and the necessary work was done. Dr. Miller returned as promised after 2 weeks, then again 2 weeks later. Each time he expressed cautious optimism at Samuel's progress. "He's gained weight," the doctor noted during his third visit, nearly 6 weeks after Samuel's birth. "Not as much as a full-term baby would have, but he's growing." Sarah beamed with pride. "He's nursing properly now, too." "No more dropper feedings." Dr. Miller nodded approvingly. "You've done remarkably well, both of you. Many early babies don't survive, especially out here on the frontier." "We couldn't have done it without you," William said earnestly. "I don't know how we'll ever repay you for riding out here so many times." The doctor waved away his concerns. "Seeing this little fellow thrive is payment enough. Though," he added with a twinkle in his eye, "I wouldn't say no to some of Mrs. Xavier's apple pie the next time I'm passing through." As Samuel reached what would have been his full-term birth date, he still remained smaller than average, but his lungs had strengthened, and his appetite was prodigious. Sarah found herself nursing him almost constantly to keep up with his demands. "He's making up for lost time," she told William one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Samuel was asleep in her arms, his little chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm that they had come to treasure. William slipped an arm around her shoulders. "You're amazing, you know that. I don't think I could have done what you did, staying strong through those first weeks, never giving up." Sarah leaned against him, her exhaustion evident but her eyes shining with contentment. "We did it together. You rode through the night for the doctor. You held him for hours when I was too tired to lift my arms. We're a team, William Xavier." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "The best team in the territory." As summer turned to fall, Samuel continued to thrive. He developed a full-throated cry that William swore could be heard all the way to Prescott. His dark hair grew thick and curly, and his eyes settled into a rich brown color that matched his father's. With Samuel's health more secure, William was able to return to his ranching duties. The small herd of cattle he had started with had grown, and there was talk in town of a new railway line that might make it easier to get beef to market. One crisp October morning, William saddled Thunder, who had recovered from his grueling night ride and was back to his spirited self. He had business in town, supplies to purchase, mail to collect, and news to gather. "I should be back by nightfall," he told Sarah, who stood in the doorway with Samuel on her hip. The baby had grown sturdier, though he was still small for his age. "Is there anything special you need?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Some cinnamon if Mr. Peterson has it in stock, and perhaps some yarn. Winter's coming and I'd like to knit Samuel some warmer clothes." William nodded. "Cinnamon and yarn. Anything else?" A mischievous smile played at Sarah's lips. "A moment alone with my husband before he rides off would be nice." William grinned, dismounting to oblige her request. He gathered Sarah and Samuel into his arms, planting a lingering kiss on his wife's lips. "I love you," he murmured against her mouth. "Both of you." "We love you too," Sarah replied, her eyes warm with affection. "Now go before it gets too late, and William, be careful." The town of Thornfield had grown since they had first settled in the area. What had once been little more than a trading post now boasted a general store, a saloon, a small church, and even a schoolhouse. As William rode down the dusty main street, he nodded greetings to familiar faces. At Peterson's general store, he tied Thunder to the hitching post and stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, announcing his arrival. "William Xavier." Amos Peterson called from behind the counter. "Haven't seen you in town for a spell. How's that miracle baby of yours?" William couldn't help the proud smile that spread across his face. Growing stronger every day, Mr. Peterson. Sarah's got him eating mashed vegetables now, alongside her milk. That's wonderful news, the storekeeper said sincerely. We've all been praying for your boy. What can I get for you today? William handed over his list of supplies. And Sarah specifically requested cinnamon and yarn if you have them. Just got a shipment of spices in last week, Peterson confirmed. As for yarn, Mrs. Peterson just finished organizing our new stock. She's got some lovely colors. As Peterson gathered the items, William browsed the store. It was better stocked than it had been even a year ago, a sign of the territory's growing prosperity. His eye caught on a display of children's toys, wooden horses, cloth dolls, and small drums. Never too early to start thinking about Christmas, Peterson commented, noticing William's interest. That little rocking horse there would make a fine gift for a boy once he's a bit bigger. William ran his hand over the smooth wooden horse. It was beautifully crafted with real horsehair for the mane and tail. How much for you? $2. And I'll hold it here until Christmas if you like, so it stays a surprise. Done, William agreed, counting out the money. Samuel might be a bit young for it this year, but he'll grow into it. With his purchases completed, William headed to the post office. There was a letter from Sarah's sister in Boston, which would please her, and a catalog from a seed company that William had written to about hardy vegetable varieties for their garden. His last stop was the saloon, not for drink but for information. The barkeeper, a man named Sullivan, had his ear to the ground on everything from cattle prices to Indian movements. Xavier, Sullivan greeted him as he entered the dim interior. Coffee, please, William nodded, taking a seat at the bar. The saloon was quiet at this hour, with only a few men playing cards in the corner. Any news worth hearing? Sullivan poured a mug of strong black coffee and slid it across the bar. Railroad surveyors were through last week. Looks like they're serious about putting a line through about 10 miles south of here. William sipped the coffee thoughtfully. That could change things around here. Already is, Sullivan confirmed. Land prices are climbing. Might be a good time to expand your holdings, if you're thinking along those lines. William had indeed been considering purchasing the adjacent property, which had stood empty since its owner had given up and returned east last spring. With a growing son and potentially more children in the future, the additional acreage would be valuable. I might just do that, he acknowledged. What else? Sullivan lowered his voice. There's been some trouble up north. Renegade Apache band hit a stagecoach last month. Army's been patrolling more heavily since then. William frowned. Relations with the local tribes had been relatively peaceful in recent years, though tensions always simmered beneath the surface. Any word on which band? Not sure, Sullivan admitted. But the Army lieutenant who stopped in yesterday seemed to think it was just a small group, not sanctioned by the chiefs. William finished his coffee, leaving a coin on the bar. Thanks for the information. I'd best head back. Don't want to worry Sarah by being late. The sun was beginning its westward descent as William started the journey home, Thunder's saddlebags laden with supplies. His mind was full of plans and possibilities, the railroad, the potential land purchase, the coming winter. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to think beyond the day-to-day survival of his son, and toward the future they would build together. The attack came without warning. One moment, William was riding peacefully along the trail. The next, Thunder reared in panic as a gunshot cracked through the air. Pain exploded in William's left shoulder, nearly knocking him from the saddle. He managed to stay mounted, urging Thunder into a gallop as more shots rang out behind him. Bandits, his mind registered dimly as he bent low over Thunder's neck. The saddlebags with the supplies made him a target, a lone rider, apparently unarmed, carrying goods from town. He'd left his rifle at home, a careless decision he now regretted bitterly. He had a small revolver in his belt, but with his wounded shoulder and the need to control Thunder at a full gallop, he couldn't risk reaching for it. Another shot whistled past his ear as he rounded a bend in the trail. He risked a glance back and saw 3 riders in pursuit, gaining ground on Thunder, who was burdened with both his weight and the supplies. Making a split-second decision, William leaned down and slashed the straps holding one of the saddlebags. It fell to the ground, spilling flour and coffee and other staples across the dusty trail. He hoped the delay as the bandits stopped to rifle through the goods would give him the lead he needed. The ploy worked, the pursuit faltered briefly. William used the opportunity to veer off the main trail onto a narrower path that led through a rocky ravine. It was a longer route home, but offered more cover and opportunities to lose his pursuers. The pain in his shoulder was becoming impossible to ignore, a burning agony that pulsed with every beat of his heart. He could feel warm blood soaking his shirt and jacket. How bad was the wound? He couldn't tell without stopping, and stopping wasn't an option. Thunder was tiring, his gallop slowing to a labored canter despite William's urging. Behind them, William could hear hoofbeats. Once again the bandits had resumed the chase. The ravine narrowed, forcing William to slow Thunder further. Ahead, the path split, one fork leading up toward higher ground, the other continuing through the ravine. William chose the higher path, hoping to gain a vantage point. As they emerged onto a rocky outcropping, William finally risked stopping. Thunder stood trembling with exhaustion as William painfully dismounted, drawing his revolver with his right hand. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, the shoulder wound bleeding freely. From this position, he could see the 3 riders entering the ravine below. They paused at the fork, apparently debating which way their quarry had gone. William waited, his breathing shallow, the revolver steady in his grip despite the pain. One of the bandits pointed up the path William had taken. They'd found his trail. There was no choice now but to make a stand. William positioned himself behind a large boulder, Thunder secured nearby. As the first rider came into view, William took careful aim and fired. The shot hit true. The man tumbled from his saddle with a shout of pain. The other 2 bandits immediately took cover, returning fire. Bullets pinged off the rocks around William as he ducked down, trying to make himself a smaller target. "You're surrounded, mister," one of the bandits called out. "Throw down your gun and what's left of your goods and maybe we'll let you live." William didn't bother responding. He knew what would happen if he surrendered. These men wouldn't leave a witness who could identify them. His only hope was to hold them off long enough to find an opportunity to escape. He checked his revolver, 4 bullets left, not enough to hold off a prolonged attack. The wound in his shoulder throbbed mercilessly, and he was beginning to feel light-headed from blood loss. If he didn't end this quickly, he wouldn't have the strength to make it home. The thought of Sarah and Samuel waiting for him, not knowing the danger he faced, filled him with a desperate resolve. He couldn't die here. He wouldn't leave them alone. One of the bandits made a dash from one boulder to another, trying to flank William's position. William fired, missing the man but forcing him back into cover. 3 bullets left. The standoff continued as the sun dipped lower. William's vision was starting to blur at the edges, a dangerous sign. He blinked hard, trying to stay focused. Then, unexpectedly, the sound of approaching riders came from the direction of town. The bandits heard it too. William could see them exchanging worried glances. "Army patrol," one of them hissed to his companion, loud enough for William to hear. "Let's get out of here." They retreated hastily, dragging their wounded comrade with them. William waited until they were out of sight before slumping against the boulder, his strength finally failing him. The approaching riders turned out to be a group of ranchers returning from town, not soldiers at all. They found William semi-conscious, still clutching his revolver. "Xavier," a familiar voice exclaimed. "Tom Johnson, his neighbor. My God, what happened?" "Bandits," William managed, his voice weak. "Shot, need to get home. Sarah's waiting." The men quickly assessed his wound. The bullet had passed clean through his shoulder, which was both good and bad. No need to dig out a bullet, but he'd lost a significant amount of blood. "We need to get him to a doctor," one of the men said. William shook his head weakly. "No. Home. Sarah knows how to tend wounds." The thought of being taken all the way back to town, leaving Sarah to wonder what had happened to him, was unbearable. "Please." Tom nodded reluctantly. "All right, but I'm sending someone for the doctor after we get you home." They fashioned a crude bandage to slow the bleeding, then helped William onto his horse. Tom rode beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. The journey home was a blur of pain and determination for William, who focused on staying conscious by thinking of Sarah and Samuel waiting for him. When they finally arrived at the cabin, the sun had set and Sarah had lit lamps in the windows. She rushed outside at the sound of horses, her face paling when she saw William slumped in the saddle, supported by Tom. "William," she cried, running to him. "What happened?" "Oh my God, there's so much blood." "Bandits," Tom explained briefly as they helped William down from Thunder. "Ambushed him on the way back from town. He held them off until we happened along." Sarah's face was a mask of fear, but her voice remained steady. "Bring him inside. I'll need hot water, clean cloth, and my sewing kit." William was only dimly aware of being carried into the cabin and laid on the bed. Samuel's cry came from somewhere nearby, and William tried to turn his head toward the sound. "He's fine," Sarah assured him, correctly interpreting his concern. "Mary came by earlier and took him to her house for the night. Said I looked like I needed rest." Her laugh was tinged with hysteria. If only she knew. The next hours were a haze of pain as Sarah cleaned and stitched his wound. Tom's eldest son had been dispatched to town for the doctor, but it would be morning at the earliest before medical help arrived. "You're lucky," Sarah told him as she worked, her fingers gentle but firm. "The bullet went clean through, missed any major vessels." "But you've lost a lot of blood, William. You need to stay still and rest." William nodded weakly. "The supplies. Had to leave one saddlebag on the trail." "Hush," Sarah scolded, tears in her eyes. "I don't care about supplies. I care about you coming home to us." By morning, William's fever had spiked, his body fighting infection from the wound. Sarah sat beside him, bathing his forehead with cool water, her face drawn with worry. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his burning forehead. "Samuel needs his father. I need my husband." "Fight, William. Fight like our son fought." In his delirium, William dreamed of the night he'd ridden for the doctor, of Samuel's birth, of the long weeks of uncertainty that had followed. He'd fought so hard to bring their son into the world safely. He couldn't leave him now, doctor. Miller arrived late in the morning, looking grim as he examined William's wound. "The bullet path is clean, and Mrs. Xavier's stitching is nearly as good as my own," he pronounced. "But infection has set in. We need to draw it out." What followed was an ordeal of pain as the doctor reopened part of the wound to drain it, then packed it with a poultice of herbs that Sarah had gathered according to his instructions. "Now we wait," he told Sarah, washing blood from his hands in a basin. "Keep the fever down as best you can. If he survives the next 2 days, he should recover." "If," Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. Dr. Miller's expression softened. "He's strong, Mrs. Xavier, and he has much to live for." He nodded toward the cradle in the corner where Samuel had been returned by Mary Johnson that morning. I've seen men recover from worse wounds because they weren't ready to leave their families. For 2 days, William hovered between life and death, the fever raging through his body. Sarah barely left his side, spooning broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow, bathing his body with cool water when the fever climbed too high, changing the poultice on his wound as Dr. Miller had instructed before departing. On the 3rd day, William's fever broke. He woke to find Sarah asleep in the chair beside the bed, her hand resting on his chest as if to reassure herself that his heart still beat. In the cradle nearby, Samuel slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled near his face. "Sarah," William whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. She startled awake immediately, her tired eyes widening as she saw him looking back at her with clarity for the first time in days. "William, you're back." "Seems so," he managed a weak smile, "though I feel like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she pressed her forehead to his. "I thought I might lose you." "Never," he promised, though his voice was barely audible. "I'll always come back to you and Samuel." Recovery was slow and frustrating for William, who was used to being active from dawn till dusk. The wound healed gradually, but Dr. Miller, who rode out weekly to check on his progress, warned that it would be months before he regained full strength in his left arm. "You're lucky to have the use of it at all," the doctor reminded him during one visit when William had been particularly frustrated by his limitations. "If that bullet had hit a few inches to the right, you might have lost the arm entirely." The incident changed William in subtle ways. He became more cautious, more aware of his responsibility to his family. He never again rode to town without his rifle, and he began teaching Sarah how to shoot the revolver, despite her initial reluctance. "I pray you'll never need to use it," he told her as he adjusted her grip on the weapon. "But if something happens to me, I need to know you and Samuel will be safe." Winter settled over the territory, blanketing the land in occasional snow and bringing short days and long nights. The Xavier cabin was snug and warm, with a well-stocked larder and plenty of firewood. William's shoulder continued to heal, and by Christmas, he could lift Samuel with either arm, though the left still ached in cold weather. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright. William rose early, tending to the livestock before returning to the cabin with a surprise. He'd been hiding in the barn the wooden rocking horse he'd purchased months earlier, salvaged from the remaining saddlebag after the bandit attack. Sarah's eyes lit up when she saw it. "William, it's beautiful. Did you make this?" He shook his head. "Bought it in town before. Well, before. Peterson kept it for me until I could fetch it last week when you thought I was helping Tom repair his fence." Samuel, now nearly 7 months old though still small for his age, stared wide-eyed at the rocking horse as William set it on the floor near the hearth. The baby reached for it eagerly, his little fingers exploring the smooth wood and soft mane. "He's too young to sit on it yet," William acknowledged, "but I thought he might enjoy looking at it, and he'll grow into it soon enough." Sarah wrapped her arms around William's waist, leaning her head against his chest. "It's perfect. This whole day is perfect." She looked up at him, her expression turning serious. "I have a gift for you too, though it's not something I could wrap." William raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh." Sarah took his hand and placed it on her stomach, a smile blooming on her face. "We're going to have another baby, William, Dr. Miller confirmed it when he was here last week." William's heart leaped with a mixture of joy and fear. Another child, a sibling for Samuel, but after the difficult birth of their son and his precarious early months, could they face that ordeal again? Sarah seemed to read his thoughts. "Dr. Miller says there's no reason to expect this baby to come early. What happened with Samuel was unusual, And even if this one does decide to arrive ahead of schedule, we're better prepared now. We know what to do." William pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "When?" "Early summer, the doctor thinks. June, perhaps." William thought of the land he'd recently purchased from the neighboring property, the plans he'd been making to expand their house in the spring. "We'll need that extra bedroom sooner than I thought," he murmured against her hair. Sarah laughed, the sound full of joy. "Yes, we will. Our family is growing, William. Are you happy?" he asked, drawing back to study her face. Truly, her eyes shone with unshed tears. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible when my father dragged me out to this wilderness. I have you, I have Samuel, and soon we'll have another little one to love. What more could I want?" The winter passed in a flurry of preparation. William worked on the house expansion whenever weather permitted, with help from Tom Johnson and other neighbors. By April, 2 new rooms had been added, a larger bedroom for William and Sarah, and a nursery for Samuel and the new baby. Sarah's pregnancy progressed normally, her belly growing round and full as spring flowers bloomed across the rangeland. Unlike her pregnancy with Samuel, which had been marked by constant worry and bouts of illness, she bloomed with health and energy. Even as her due date approached, Dr. Miller visited regularly, both to check on Sarah's progress and to deliver news from town. The railroad construction had begun, bringing new settlers and opportunities to the area. There was talk of Thornfield becoming a proper town, with a mayor and town council. "They're looking for men with good sense to serve," the doctor mentioned casually during one visit in late May. "Your name's been mentioned, Xavier." William looked up from where he was planing wood for a new cradle. "Me? I'm just a rancher." "A respected one," the doctor countered. "People remember how you rode through the night for your wife and son. They know you stood your ground against bandits rather than let them terrorize the area. You're the kind of man people trust." William shook his head, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'll think about it, but right now my focus is here." He nodded toward Sarah, who sat nearby, mending one of Samuel's outgrown gowns for the new baby. June arrived with unexpected heat, the sun beating down mercilessly on the land. Sarah grew uncomfortable in the final weeks of her pregnancy, finding it difficult to sleep in the warm nights. "I don't remember it being this hot when Samuel was coming," she complained one evening as she fanned herself on the porch. William brought her a cup of cool water from the well. "That's because he arrived in January during that cold snap." Sarah smiled ruefully. "True enough. Let's hope this one decides to wait for cooler weather." But the baby had its own timetable. 2 weeks before the date Dr. Miller had calculated, Sarah woke in the middle of the night with familiar pains. "William," she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently, "I think it's time." He was instantly alert, memories of Samuel's hasty arrival flooding back. "Are you sure? It's early again." "Not very early," she reassured him. "And the pains are different this time, more regular, not so sharp. Dr. Miller said that's a good sign." William helped her to a sitting position. "Should I ride for the doctor now?" Sarah considered the question, placing a hand on her belly to feel the contraction that was building. "Not yet, I think. The pains are still far apart. Let's wait until morning unless things change quickly." By dawn, it was clear that the baby was indeed coming, though Sarah's labor was progressing much more slowly than it had with Samuel. William sent word to the Johnsons, asking Mary to come stay with Sarah while he fetched the doctor. This time, the ride to Prescott felt completely different. Though William pushed Thunder to a good pace, there wasn't the same desperate urgency. The morning was beautiful, the air still cool, the sun turning the eastern sky to gold as he rode. Dr. Miller was just having his breakfast when William arrived, and he greeted the news of Sarah's labor with calm efficiency. Sounds like a textbook progression, he assured William. First babies often come in a rush, especially when they're premature like Samuel. Second babies typically take their time, which is actually better for both mother and child. They arrived back at the ranch to find Sarah walking slowly around the front room, supported by Mary Johnson. Her face was flushed with exertion, but she smiled when she saw William and the doctor. "You made good time," she said, pausing as another contraction built. She breathed through it steadily before continuing. "This one's in no hurry, it seems." Dr. Miller set down his bag and washed his hands in the basin Mary had prepared. "That's often the way with second babies, Mrs. Xavier." "How far apart are the pains?" "About 10 minutes now," Mary supplied. "Getting closer together but still not very intense," she says. The doctor nodded. "Plenty of time then. Keep walking as long as you're comfortable, Mrs. Xavier. Movement can help things along." The labor continued throughout the morning and into the afternoon. William stayed by Sarah's side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, offering sips of water when she could take them. Samuel, now nearly a year old, was fascinated by the proceedings. Mary kept him occupied with toys and stories, but he frequently toddled over to his mother, patting her belly with curious hands. "Soon, little one," Sarah told him during a brief respite between contractions. "Soon you'll meet your brother or sister." As evening approached, the contractions finally intensified. Dr. Miller checked Sarah's progress and announced that it was time to move to the bed. William lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest for a moment before laying her on the fresh linens Mary had prepared. "You're doing beautifully," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. "I'm so proud of you." Sarah's grip on his hand tightened as another contraction seized her. "Stay," she gasped when it had passed. "I want you here this time, not waiting outside." William looked questioningly at Dr. Miller, who shrugged. "It's not conventional, but it's your home. If Mrs. Xavier wants you here, then here you'll stay." So William remained at Sarah's side as she labored through the final stages, offering quiet encouragement, letting her crush his hand when the pain peaked, watching in awe as their second child began to enter the world. "I can see the head," Dr. Miller announced. "Dark hair like Samuel had." "One more good push, Mrs. Xavier." Sarah gathered her remaining strength, bearing down with a determination that left William breathless with admiration. And then, suddenly, their child slipped into the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. "A girl, Dr. Miller proclaimed, holding up the squalling infant for them to see. "And a fine set of lungs on her, too." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as the doctor placed the baby on her chest. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." William found himself unable to speak, his throat tight with emotion as he gazed at his daughter. Unlike Samuel, who had been so fragile and silent at birth, this child was robust and vocal, her little fists waving in protest at her sudden eviction from her warm, safe home. "She's perfect," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "Just like her mother." Dr. Miller busied himself with the necessary tasks, cutting the cord, delivering the afterbirth, checking the baby thoroughly before wrapping her in a soft blanket. 8 pounds, I'd estimate. A good size, especially coming a bit early. She's completely healthy. Mary brought Samuel over to meet his sister. The little boy stared in fascination at the tiny bundle in his mother's arms. "Bah," he said solemnly, one of the few words in his limited vocabulary. "Yes, baby," Sarah confirmed with a tired smile. "Your sister." After the doctor and Mary had left with promises to return in the morning, William sat on the edge of the bed beside Sarah and their children. Samuel had fallen asleep curled against his mother's side, while the newborn nursed contentedly at her breast. "What shall we call her?" William asked softly, stroking a finger along his daughter's downy cheek. Sarah considered for a moment. Elizabeth, she decided. It means consecrated to God. Because she's another blessing we didn't dare hope for after all we went through with Samuel. Elizabeth, William repeated, testing the name. I like it. Elizabeth Sarah Xavier. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes full of love despite her exhaustion. Are you happy, William? With our little family, our home, this life we've built? William leaned down to kiss her gently, then pressed another kiss to Samuel's head and a third to Elizabeth's tiny hand. More than I ever thought possible. When I rode through the night for the doctor that January, I was terrified of losing you both. I couldn't have imagined then that we'd be here now, with two beautiful children and a future full of promise. We've come through so much together, Sarah murmured, her eyes drifting closed as fatigue claimed her. Every trial has only made us stronger. Rest now, William whispered, carefully lifting Samuel to place him in his own bed. I'll watch over Elizabeth while you sleep. He settled into the rocking chair beside the bed, cradling his newborn daughter against his chest. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. On the wall, the shadow of the rocking horse moved gently as a breeze stirred the curtains. Elizabeth's tiny hand had escaped her blanket, and she wrapped her fingers around William's thumb with surprising strength. He marveled at the perfection of her, the delicate eyelashes resting on her cheeks, the bow of her pink lips, the soft rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. This, he thought, was what he had fought for that night in January nearly 18 months ago, and again during those terrible days after the bandit attack. Not just for Sarah and Samuel, but for all the possibilities that lay ahead for moments like this, holding his daughter while his wife and son slept peacefully nearby. For the life they were building together on this wild frontier. As darkness fell, William Xavier rocked his daughter gently, watching over his family, his heart full of a peace and contentment he had never known before coming to this land, before meeting the brave, beautiful woman who had become his wife, before holding his children in his arms. Sleep well, little one, he whispered to Elizabeth. Your story is just beginning. The years passed, bringing both joys and challenges to the Xavier family. Thornfield grew from a settlement into a proper town, with the railroad bringing new opportunities and new faces. William reluctantly accepted a position on the town council, his level-headed approach to problems earning him the respect of neighbors and newcomers alike. Samuel grew into a sturdy boy who, despite his early difficulties, showed no lasting effects from his premature birth. He had William's height and quiet determination, but Sarah's thoughtful nature and love of books. Elizabeth, true to her dramatic entrance into the world, developed into a spirited child with a quick mind and quicker tongue, her dark curls and flashing eyes reminiscent of her mother's. Two more children joined the family: James, born 3 years after Elizabeth, and Catherine, who arrived 2 years after that. The Xavier Ranch prospered, expanding to include not just cattle but also horses, which William bred and trained with a skill that became known throughout the territory. On a warm summer evening 15 years after Samuel's birth, the family gathered on the porch of their home, no longer a simple cabin, but a sprawling ranch house built to accommodate their growing family and frequent visitors. William and Sarah sat side by side on a swing William had crafted for their 10th anniversary, watching as their children finished their evening chores. Samuel, now a young man of 16, was showing 8-year-old Catherine how to properly groom a pony. Elizabeth, 14 and as headstrong as ever, was arguing good-naturedly with 12-year-old James about whose turn it was to collect eggs in the morning. Did you ever imagine this? Sarah asked softly, her hand finding William's as they swayed gently on the swing. "That night when you rode for the doctor, did you ever think we'd be here now, with 4 healthy children and all of this?" She gestured to the prosperous ranch spread out before them. William squeezed her hand, still marveling sometimes at the life they had built together. "I didn't dare hope for it," he admitted. "All I could think about that night was getting back to you, bringing help, saving our son." "You did," Sarah said simply. "You saved him. You saved all of us in different ways." William shook his head. "We saved each other, Sarah. And we built this life together, one day at a time." From inside the house came the sound of the clock chiming the hour. Soon it would be time for supper, for the comfortable chaos of family meals, for stories around the fire, for children being tucked into bed. But for now, William and Sarah Xavier sat together in the fading light, watching their children, remembering the desperate ride through the night that had been just the beginning of their journey together. A journey that had brought them through danger and joy, loss and triumph, to this moment of perfect contentment in the land they had made their own. "I love you, Sarah Xavier," William said, his voice low and fervent. "Today and always." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, a position as familiar and comforting as their heartbeats. "And I love you, William Xavier. Today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." Around them, the Arizona Territory settled into evening, the sky ablaze with stars as their children's laughter echoed across the land. They had tamed together a family forged in crisis, but sustained by love, their story still unfolding beneath the vast western sky.